This is TWiT.
Remember at the about this time last year, both Apple and Google announced, hey, we're going to create an API, privacy-forward API, for contact tracing. It's going to solve the pandemic. Everybody's going to have it on their phone. Every state's going to come out with an app. And bingo, badunga, bungo, COVID-19 will disappear. They weren't, to be fair, the only people who thought COVID-19 will disappear. MIT Media Lab has now come out with a report that says the contact tracing apps not only didn't take off, hardly anybody made one, and they didn't do anything. It was a perfect example of Silicon Valley hubris. Like, oh, we're smart. We can figure this. We'll figure. Hey, hold my beer, and nothing. Make sense? Agree? Disagree?
I mean, the problem with a contract tracing app is it can tell you if you have come into close contact with someone who was infected. It did nothing to change what you will do with that information. And we've learned that's not an easy thing.
I turned it on right away. In a year, I have had 0 contacts. I mean, nothing.
The only time I've had contacts was in the Vatican.
Oh, really? Your phone went off, said you've been near somebody with COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Like right
That's
in front
probably
of St.
because
Peter's.
so many people had it.
Yeah.
Well, here's why I think that this stuff didn't work. It was because of the asymptomatic nature in the beginning of the disease. So if you're not going to test positive right away and you're not going to have any symptoms. So once that happens, the whole idea of contact tracing is kind of off the table, because think about how many people you're going to come in contact with every day when you have no idea. So you have 5 days in your life. You don't know you have COVID. You test positive for COVID. How many contacts? If you're a somewhat busy person, it could be dozens, or maybe even above 100 people that you've come in contact with. Let's say you went grocery shopping, right? So now are all those people going to have to quarantine? Like it just became a point because of the nature of this disease that if you are going to actually put contact tracing into place, you might as well just shut down, all society for a couple of weeks and then resume after that.
Yeah, because
it never got to the place where we're going to do that. So if you're going to
in totalitarian countries like China, it worked because they were willing to weld the door shut and say nobody's leaving.
In most Western countries, the people who would benefit from a contact tracing app were already not putting themselves into a position where they would need a contact tracing app.
Yeah, we were staying home anyway.
We were staying home anyway, so what was the use?
And then it doesn't get picked up on the test. So you do contact tracing. Okay, you got notified, you had a contact, then you get tested. So like if this contact tracing actually worked according to plan, you'd get a ping every, couple of weeks probably.
Right.
Then you go and get tested. You have no idea if you have the disease. It just wasn't something that lent itself to contact tracing. It really was going to be either one of 2 options, well, maybe 3 options. One is the totalitarian option, which we saw in China. 2 is everybody in the population wears masks. 3 is you kind of hold your breath and wait till the vaccine. And so there have been different countries that have gone about it different ways. Obviously, the U.S. plan, the most likely thing we were always going to do is wait for the technology to bail us out, and it did.
MIT Technology Review does say there might, down the road, this might have some value, but we should learn some lessons from this. And the chief lesson was the public didn't trust it. Mm-hmm. So people were, this is another case where people were so worried about privacy. Google and Apple designed a lot of privacy into this, so much so that public health officials said, well, it's not going to be any good for us because we can't find out who's exposed. 25 states rolled out apps. They surveyed all the states, 25 states and D.C. Virginia was the first to make it available to its residents in August, which was kind of late. Others are only getting started now. Massachusetts began testing its app in April of this year, so a little late. By the way, the Massachusetts app is kind of interesting because there's been a lot of anecdotal reports that Google is installing it automatically on people's phones. Did you see that?
Oh, I see nothing wrong with that. I mean, sorry, I couldn't say it with a straight face. I tried.
Well, guys, we'll get to the bottom of it at some point. Maybe they turned on. See, I did that on my iPhone. I turned it on and it said whenever California comes up with one.
No,
it shouldn't be installed automatically on your phone.
My device, my rules.
Yeah. Well,
we are so furiously independent here. So
Yeah.
even if this stuff worked to perfection, we're going to voluntarily quarantine. That didn't seem like it was really going to happen in this country.
No, that's true. All right. So, well, it's good though. You should do a postmortem after this stuff and see did this work?
The technology is interesting. What they did to anonymize the data was actually interesting and encouraging. But I think we're right here in that this kind of disease just wasn't good for contact tracing because there is such a long incubation period. It's not effective because all that it takes is one person who says, "Oh, the contact tracing app told me that I was exposed and I wasn't," and suddenly no one trusts.
Yeah. Well, there is one bright light. We actually made a vaccine faster than ever before, and there's a technology that has some real promise.
Well, we did and we
with
didn't.
mRNA.
Because this vaccine was being developed before COVID.
Right.
It's 20 years in the making before we got to
2020. But we've got this idea that we can using mRNA, we can over a couple of days genetically sequence a disease, and a couple of days later, using computer technology, create a potential vaccine for it. Of course, we still have to test it on humans and things like that. We just eliminate that part, and then and I have a feeling. With variants and boosters and so forth, we may actually be doing this again and again. And
this is not going away.
And now companies are talking about using it for other illnesses, including HIV. That mRNA may be a kind of a golden tool. So there's there's things we learned.